The defendant's
present. Counselor present.
Jury's absent. Anything we need to address before we proceed this morning? Okay. All right. Good to go.
Let me just ask one question, if I may. Does the state intend to call Detective Falk this morning?
Yes.
Well, he just walked in. I think that's the answer. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. I mean, just walking in is generally not the answer. But I think Ms. Holt indicated that she's going to.
He is going to?
That's what she said.
Yes.
All right. Sheriff Essinger to come in, please. Your commitment to this case. Dr. Ross was on the stand Friday afternoon, as you recall, and I don't think we finished her examination on the state's case, so I'll let y'all proceed.
Thank you, Honor. Dr. Ross, when we broke on Friday, we had been discussing basically your first steps in this case and what you were asked to do. And I believe you testified that in September you had received the remains of Laura Ackerson.
That is correct.
And at that time, you had been asked to undergo or to render an opinion with regard to a trauma examination of her skeletal remains. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you had testified about observing various dismemberment sites based on the remains that you received.
Yes.
Your Honor, may I bring the skeleton around and ask Dr. Ross a few questions about
Sure,
that?
we can do that.
And may she step down?
She may, certainly.
At this time, if I could also have published on the screen State's Exhibit A509, which is Dr. Ross's report that's previously been introduced.
Sure.
And Dr. Ross, you are standing before the jury now with the skeleton. Also, this part of your report that's up on the screen, this is what you prepared to illustrate what you observed with regard to the dismemberment sites. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that was meant to illustrate exactly where the sites of dismemberment were conducted on Laura Ackerson. And what we can see here, based on that diagram as well, is that both her arms were removed at the site of the upper aspect of the humerus, which is your upper arm bone right here. Her head was also taken off at the fifth cervical vertebra, which is the fifth neck bone on the way down around this area right here. She was also dismembered on the lumbar vertebra in this area as well as in the upper aspect of her femoral bone. And in the picture that we saw also on Friday, this is the area that we were looking at with the cut marks, the cut part here. And so she was bilaterally dismembered here, and she was also bilaterally dismembered on the lower part of the leg bone right here as well.
And those conclusions that you reached were all as a result of being able to examine the skeletal remains that you received, which had cuttings that had been performed by the medical examiner's office in Texas. Is that right?
That is correct.
And so you, again, were able to distinguish in the areas that you've described the difference between where the medical examiner had made a cut and the difference between the dismemberment site itself. Is
Yes,
that right?
that is correct.
And you've pointed out the photograph that you testified earlier on Friday about where we saw the 14 teeth per inch.
Yes.
Would you point out again the area?
It was in this area. I can't remember what side it was, but it was in this area right in here. You see that? And then you see this is the femoral head right here. So it was at the point where she was dismembered up here where the greater trochanter is.
And again, that was a larger bone that
Yes.
was not as fragile, that you were able to make some
Yes.
conclusions.
And it has a thicker cortical bone, which is what we need, the compact bone versus that spongy bone we talked about.
And at some point later in this investigation, and investigation as far as your report, you used a particular bone to make some comparison using a pig proxy. So,
Yes.
well, can you, while we have the skeleton here, can you point out that area?
Yes, we use the pig proxy because number one, it's the best proxy for a human model that we have, and that's both in clinical settings and in non-clinical settings. So it's been, well known to use pigs are the best proxy for us. So the one that we received from Ms. Ackerson, we had received a femur, and again, this is your femur right here, after we had initially investigated after this report. And that femur had been retained, I believe, by the medical examiner in Texas. And then we received that later, and it had some really good markings on it that we were able to compare. Those striations, remember that we talked about, where you can actually see the etchings of the saw on the bone, and we were able to examine those on Laura Ackerson. And then what we did was we were provided by Detective Falk a skill reciprocating saw with various blades in there, and we tested those blades on the pig proxies and then compared those marks to those found on Miss Ackerson.
Okay. And which bone?
It's on the femur.
Okay.
Yes, it's on the femur.
And as part of this initial submission and the examination that you conducted initially, you've also indicated that you observed an injury to the bone in the neck.
Yes, I did.
Can you describe the injury that you observed in that area?
The injury was on the 4th cervical vertebra, so if you count from the top, it would be right in here, and it was on the anterior aspect or the body of that vertebra. And it was right in the middle of that body, and it was what we call a stab wound. So it was a stab mark to the body of that vertebra.
And when you use the term stab wound, what distinction are you making when you use that terminology?
That terminology is based on when we have sharp force trauma. So a cut wound would be a wound longer than it is deep, and it would be cutting action and cutting motion. A stab wound is deeper than it is long, so meaning you are stabbing, so the depth would be deeper than it is long based on a cutting motion.
And you indicated that was you observed that on the 4th cervical vertebra?
On the 4th cervical vertebra, that's correct.
And the vertebrae that were present with the head or the skull went down to the 5th cervical
Yes,
vertebra?
and at the 5th cervical vertebra, you could tell that it had been cut at that point, and that's where the head had been removed on the 5th cervical vertebra.
And the cut that you observed with regard to the 5th cervical vertebra, how was it different than the stab wound that you observed on the 4th cervical vertebra?
Multiple fracturing, cuts versus stabs, and because these bones are relatively small in the upper neck area, and those fractured quite a bit. So that was the distinction between the stab and the cutting.
And you explained the stab, and in terms of the cutting, when you refer to a cutting, is that wider than it is long?
Yes, it is. It is longer or wider than it is deep. Yes.
Thank you. If you could return to stand.
Okay, sure.
With regard to the stab wound that you observed to the fourth cervical vertebra, did you take a photograph of that particular area of Laura Ackerson's remains?
I did.
And did you include that as part of your report to illustrate your findings and what you observed?
Yes, I did.
With regard to that stab wound, is this the photograph that's up on the screen now from your report illustrating the stab wound?
It is.
And do you have the laser pointer up there? I think you've got it boxed off, but is that?
Yes, it's this area right here where you can see that there is a stab wound right here. And this is using a high-powered microscope so you can see the morphology of that stab wound.
And can you explain
Right here.
why you would use the high-powered microscope?
Well, one of the reasons why we use it is to look at the morphology and also to see if we can establish whether it was a single bladed knife, a serrated knife, or a double bladed knife. And we were able to establish here, if you see this area right here and you see this right here, based on the current literature on types of instruments used, it is consistent with the serrated knife.
With regard to the stab wound, and you've indicated that this was consistent with a serrated knife, did you see any other areas of the skeletal remains that showed any stabs or stabbing from what you received?
Not on the remains that I received, I did not.
Did you undertake to kind of examine the cut marks that you observed on the various remains or various bones in Laura Ackerson's remains and make any conclusions with regard to the cut marks that were different from the stab one that you
Yes.
observed? And can you describe that?
We went through, as the one that we observed on Friday, we tried to establish the teeth per inch that was used to cut the remains of Laura Ackerson. And also there was on the tibia, the anterior proximal portion, which I believe is the following image after this. You have this right here, and this is generally called a persistence mark. We call them persistence mark because the perpetrator is persisting on cutting. They're not hesitating. So hesitation marks would refer to an individual that's hesitating, but when we're dealing with issues of dismemberment, they're called persistence marks. And these kind of marks will tell you a lot. What we look at is the wall of each bone and the base of that cut that doesn't go all the way through the bone. And that is called a kerf, K-E-R-F. And that kerf will give us information as to if it's a saw. For example, the squared off edge at the bottom, that tells us that it is a saw that was used, versus, let's say, a knife. A knife would have a V-shaped bottom or kerf wall. So those are the types of things that we utilize.
And so the kerf wall is actually, or the kerf, you've used here kerf floor?
Yes.
That actually refers to the mark in the bone itself?
That refers to the mark in the bone, and the floor is the bottom of that mark, and the walls would be the sides of those marks.
And that gives you information with regard to, as you've just testified, the type of instrument that would have been used to make those tool marks or markings on the bone?
That is correct.
And you described the persistence mark, and I believe you have false start.
False starts is also another term to use, yes.
And what about these marks leads you to be able to make conclusions with regard to hesitation or persistence?
Generally, hesitation marks are referred to as in situations of suicide. But when you're dealing with situations of dismemberment, the perpetrator is, again, attempting to either conceal or dispose of the remains in a certain way, so they're persisting, or they're called false starts because they attempt one form to dismember the body, it doesn't work, and then they attempt it in a different spot.
And based on what you observed, did you see multiple false starts?
My recollection is that I didn't see that many. But then again, we did not have the complete set of remains of Laura Ackerson.
And with regard to the information that you did have and that you were able to glean from the examination of Laura Ackerson's remains, did you make some conclusions with regard to the type of instrument that would have made the saw marks?
Yes.
And can you describe what conclusions you reached?
I discussed, it was based on the kerf floor, it was based on all the TPI, and based on the conclusions that we had, I had initially observed that it could have been a hand-powered versus a mechanical-powered. However, there's a paucity of research that has been done in these types of cases, and my recommendations were to test the reciprocating saw, and that's when we went ahead and tested that with the pig proxies.
So at the point before you even knew about the reciprocating saw, you had made some conclusions that you believed that this, in fact, was a saw that was used.
Yes.
At that point, you couldn't give much more information
Correct.
as to whether or not it was mechanical or powered.
Correct. Yes.
Were you able to, based on the teeth per inch or the TPI, were you able to rule out a number of possible saws that could have been used?
I believe we were able to rule out several saws based on the TPI.
And kind of at this point, after you've had these remains and had your opportunity to examine the various sites and look under the microscope, was it your opinion that two different tools had been used with regard to Laura Ackerson's remains and the evidence that was left?
Yes, one was based on the stab wound on the cervical vertebra. That was very different than what was used to dismember her body, which was a saw.
And was there anything about the saw marks on the remains that indicated to you that it was more than one saw or different saws?
In many of her remains that I think we could clearly state that it was most likely one saw that was used. However, it's possible that more than one was utilized. But again, we did not have the full set of remains.
And at a later time, did you receive information that a reciprocating saw had been discovered as being purchased around the time of Laura Ackerson's murder?
Yes.
And can you describe basically a reciprocating saw and how that works?
Reciprocating saw is a mechanical powered saw, and it has blades that reciprocate in and out and leave certain striations.
And after you received information that may be relevant in this case, did you make some recommendations about what should be done from that point forward?
Yes, I recommended that we be provided with the same brand and type of reciprocating saw as was found in evidence. Also with the same blades, numerous blades that came with the reciprocating saw and other blades that I believe had been purchased. And we recommended also to test that saw on our pig proxies.
And so was a steel reciprocating saw provided to you by Detective Falk?
Yes, it was.
And you indicated you also received the blades that came with that saw as well as an additional blade that had been purchased separately. Is that right?
That is correct.
Now, may I approach Dr. Ross?
You may.
Dr. Ross, this is State's Exhibit 511. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what is this?
This is the skill reciprocating saw that was provided to me for comparison.
And is this a saw that requires being plugged in?
Yes.
Okay. And there are two blades that are taped to the top of this?
Yes.
And are these the blades that came with this saw?
Yes.
Okay. And did you make some notations so that you would be able to recognize those blades in terms of the numbers that are on them?
Yes, the numbers are listed in my report, and also the type of blades that were used, which is a wood-fast blade.
Also handing you what has been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 512.
Yes,
Do you recognize that?
I do. This was the additional blade that was used as well. And this was the all-purpose blade.
And so at the time that Detective Falk came to you, he provided you with the skill saw, which is State's Exhibit 511, as well as an additional blade, which is State's Exhibit 512.
Correct.
And the skill saw had come with the two blades that are taped to the top of that box.
Yes.
And did the skill saw that you received, I mean, did it appear to be brand new?
They were all brand new. I had to actually open the packaging.
At this time, the state moved to introduce into evidence State's Exhibit 511 and 512.
I move so.
And Dr. Ross, after receiving the saw and the saw blade, can you describe to the jury kind of the process you went through at that point?
Yes, at that point, we tested the two types of blades. So the skill saw came with two of the same type of blade, which was the wood blade, and the all-purpose blade as well. So we tested both those blades on the pig proxies. And then what we did, and we also tested them using a model. We didn't deflesh the pig bones to begin with. We want it to be as consistent as it was, for example, to real life scenario where she would have been dismembered with all her tissue. So we did the same thing with the pig bones, that we actually cut through tissue and bone using what we called, remember we discussed wet versus dry bone, to make sure that the bone was wet and would be an appropriate comparison. After that point, then we processed the remains in order to take off the tissue and in order to be able to examine them under the microscope and make our comparisons.
And did you eventually record your findings in your report, State's Exhibit A510, which has previously been admitted into evidence?
Yes.
And what were the results of your findings?
The results of our findings were that the all-purpose saw were not consistent with the saw marks that were found on Laura Ackerson. However, the saw marks produced by the wood-fast saw were consistent with the cuts and the striations found on Laura Ackerson.
And in terms of the skill saw that you were being provided and you were using to make your comparisons in this case, are there multiple speeds that
Yes.
are available?
Yes, there are multiple speeds with the actual reciprocating saw. So we also tested the speeds. At what point could you get through the tissue and get to the bone and make those cuts? And we found that it was a speed 5 setting with the wood-fast saw.
And I mean, how far did the speeds go? I mean, was that toward the upper end, or do you recall?
Probably mid to upper, I would recall, yes.
And so what you ended up finding was that one of the blades that had actually come with the skill saw matched the marks that you saw on Laura Ackerson's remains?
Yes.
Again, this was the femur bone
Yes.
that you had to compare at this point.
Yes, and that was the second bone that we had received after the first examination.
And was that an area where you had a good, a wide enough and detailed enough area to really see these striations?
Yes, it was good compact bone that we could examine the striations.
And did you then or as part of this, you indicated you made the comparison under the microscope. Did you
Yes.
attach a photograph magnified to basically be able to illustrate your findings with regard to
Yes.
the marks you observed on the pig proxy with the saw blade that came with the skill saw at speed 5 to Laura Ackerson's remains?
Yes, that's correct.
And is, Your Honor, may I publish A510 with regard to this photograph?
You may.
And this is part of your report as well. You included
Yes.
this. And the first photograph that we have up on the screen, can you, you actually have two. Do you have your report in front of you?
I do.
Okay. So what are we seeing in this first
What we're
photograph?
seeing here, these are the remains of Laura Ackerson. And what we are examining here, as you can see, you see these striations here? These are the striations that we would use as comparison. This right here is adipocere. Adipocere, or another crude term for it, is waxy fat. So when you are exposed to a wet or moist environment, your fatty tissues will turn into this waxy fat or adipocere. So this is all we're seeing here. This is not part of the examination that we're making the comparison to. But what you should look at here are these striations. This is the blade, the all-purpose blade that was provided. As you can see, it's much wider than the striations that were produced, that are observed on Laura Ackerson.
So that lower part that's identified as pig proxy,
Yes.
those striations were made as a result of using the second blade that did not come as part of the skill saw.
That is correct.
Dr. Ross, can you explain what's shown here on this second set of photographs?
And this is that same photograph of Ms. Ackerson. And this down here is the comparison of that wood fast blade. And as you can see, it's a match to what we had up here.
And again, that bottom photograph was, with the pig proxy, was the photograph that was taken of the part of the pig leg that had been dismembered using the skill saw as well as the blade that came with that skill saw at a speed number 5.
Correct.
And you identified that blade as in your report as the one that matched, which is the one that the wood fast blade.
The wood fast blade.
And what's the number of that blade?
Let me go back to my report. It is 94061.
Thank you, that's all I have.
All right, thank you. You have a question?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning, Dr. Ross.
Good morning.
Let me ask you first, when you received the remains from Dr. Radish, did you receive only bone tissue?
There was bone, and I believe there was some tissue because some of the containers had formalin in them. But there was some with tissue, but mostly bone.
Did it become necessary in your testing that the flesh be removed?
I did not macerate any remains for this case.
Now, the bone that you examined, how would you describe the human bone in the sense of its density?
Well, it depends on what site you are looking at. So we have heavier bones such as the femora. They would be more dense than in other areas, whereas you would have a less dense area if it would have more spongy or the honeycomb structures.
And the bones that are dense, such as the femur, would you agree that it's difficult to saw those bones in half using a reciprocal saw?
I don't know. I don't generally saw bones with reciprocating saws, so I'm assuming it would depend on the person, on where on the bone, because you
Well,
have various areas.
Let me ask you this, would it add to the difficulty of dismembering a body the fact that the flesh was still on the bone?
That also depends. We were able to do it with speed 5 and a certain type of blade. So we were not able to do so with the all-purpose blade.
You were not able to do the sawing with the all-purpose blade?
Yes, we weren't able to do it adequately with the all-purpose. That was a lot more difficult.
But you were able to do it with the wood fast blade.
That's correct.
Now, and how many different portions of the remains were provided to you?
Of Miss Ackerson?
Yes, ma'am.
There were a number of portions provided in the first test, and then on the final examination where we compared these remains, I believe it was just one femur.
Once you had those remains in your possession, and I take it that the next thing that you would do would be to examine the striations on the portions of the bones that were dismembered. Am I correct?
Correct.
And that's one of the photographs that you've shown is the photograph taken of the striations on the femur.
Yes.
Now, you also said that in order to determine the type of saw that was used to do the dismemberment, that it was necessary to use a pig proxy.
Yes.
Tell me about that process, if you will.
It was necessary to use a pig proxy because we did not have, and we don't advocate using human cadavers for these types of studies because of ethical issues. So pigs are the best proxy to use in these types of situations.
Do you start with a live pig?
No.
Describe for me, if you will, the differences between the blood vessel systems of a pig and a human.
That I don't know.
When you receive, I take it you receive a pig that has its flesh on its bones initially.
Correct.
And how long has it been in this, how long had it been in this instance that since the pig that you used had died?
He was fresh killed.
And did you attempt to saw through the flesh of the pig with the reciprocating chainsaw?
We removed his forelimbs and hind limbs and forelimbs, and those are the ones that we actually used for the test.
And you sawed through the flesh in order to get to the bone?
Correct.
Did that create debris?
Did it create debris?
Debris.
We did it outdoors. So
You
we
did
were
that.
wearing full personal protective equipment.
Did it out in a dirty area?
We did it in a field.
In a
Yes,
field.
in a research field.
And one of the reasons that you do that is because you don't want to mess up your room with whatever debris is created by the sawing of the pig proxy, correct?
No, not necessarily. The reason we do that is because we're dealing with a large hog, and the best way to carry him out is in the back of a truck and place him in the field and start at the field site. But we have conducted comparisons in the laboratory under our hoods.
Now, when you cut through the flesh and were you able to cut through the flesh and the bone using the wood fast saw?
Yes.
but you were not able to cut through the bone and the flesh using the,
We were, but it was more difficult.
I see. Okay, so once you've done that, were you then able to cut the various portions of the pig bone under the microscope to determine the nature of the striations?
That's correct.
And from there, you make the comparison between the striations on the pig bone to the striations on Laura Ackerson's femur.
Correct.
And that's what we've seen on the board.
And that's exactly what you saw on the board.
Is that there was a match between the wood fast saw
Mhm.
but there was not a match with the other saw.
That's correct.
Was that saw, the wood fast saw, used with this, or with the reciprocating skill saw that you had before you?
Yes.
After you had done your cutting of the pig proxy in the field, was it necessary to clean up behind yourself?
Yes, we always clean up behind ourselves. It's
And what is
standard
it that-
practice.
What is it that you clean up?
We clean up any kind of biohazardous material, whether it's blood or tissue or what have you.
And did you clean up blood in this instance?
Yes.
When you cut through the pig vessels, did it create a spray of blood?
No.
Did it create a spray of tissue when you cut through the pig proxy tissue?
I don't recall a spray of tissue.
Did the skill saw jam up as you tried to, with the flesh, as you tried to cut through it?
Not to my recollection.
You also indicated that you found a stab wound, what you described as a stab wound on the fourth cervical vertebra.
That's correct.
Was that a stab wound that was created by a knife with a sharp point?
Most likely, yes, with a serrated knife.
With a
Correct.
serrated point,
A serrated blade.
serrated blade?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any way to tell which occurred first, the dismemberment or the knife wound?
No, there's not.
Can I have a moment, Your Honor?
Sure.
Just a couple questions. Just for clarification purposes, that skill saw was, the same saw was used in this, there weren't other saws that were used?
It was only the skill saw provided by Detective Falk.
And the blades, which would have been referred to as the wood fast and the all-purpose, those were the things that were changed. The same saw was used, but they were
Correct.
the two different kinds of blades. Is that right?
Correct.
And the serrated knife, by serrated you mean kind of as you showed in the photograph where it has that?
Yes, it has the scalloped edges, you know, almost like a large bread knife that you would cut that has serrated edges. That's what we're talking about, serrated.
Thank you, that's all.
Right.
Ask just one other thing. You indicated that you saw that there were some false starts, what you call false starts.
Yes.
What that would indicate, would it not, was that the person that was doing the dismemberment had attempted to sever the bone, the flesh in the bone at that point, but for some reason wasn't successful.
That's correct.
So that person would then go on to a second spot and attempt
Yes.
to do the
Either,
same thing again.
yes, either in the same spot or another spot, and it appeared it was a different spot. That's correct.
How many false starts did you see in the area of the femur?
You know, I don't remember. I don't have that recollection.
Would you, is the femur the hardest bone in the body?
The shaft is pretty hard, yes, but the distal ends are not because they are composed of a lot of spongy bone.
So it would have been more difficult to solve the femur than the feet, for example.
Well, it depends, because if you do, for example, on the tibia, that's a pretty hard bone too, and that's at the point of the ankles. So dismembering a body, it just in general is very difficult.
Thank you, that's all I have. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, yes. Doctor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The witness is excused, thank you. Is Ms. Lask back?
Yes, I would say we recall Courtney Lask.
Okay, great. Good morning, Ms. Lask. Good
morning.
President, you'll recall that Ms. Lask testified maybe, I think, Friday afternoon, and we did not finish her testimony, and, or was it Thursday? Thursday afternoon. We didn't finish her testimony, and we've delayed her testimony until today. So we're going to let the state finish the examination of Courtney Lask, and then we'll pass her to the defendant's counsel for questions. Mrs. Ellinger, you have further questions?
I do, Your Honor. Ms. Lask, where we left off on Thursday, you were going over the forensic examination of one of those two iPods. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Your Honor, Met Published States is at 495 at this
You may.
So to catch up where we left off, this is one of the two iPods that you had found that were given to you to examine.
That's correct.
And this is, I believe, you labeled this item number 12. Is that-
Correct.
And it was on the device, it was labeled as Grant Hayes' iPod.
Correct.
Okay. If I could draw your attention to, we went through the dictionary and the other Wi-Fi. Are there also photos that are saved on this iPod?
There were.
And do those, each one of those photos, they have time and date information saved with them?
They should.
Okay. Starting at the bottom of this, does it appear to be that there's some from July 9th of 2011?
That's correct.
Here, is there a photograph that, looking at the date here, is it dated July 12th of 2011 at 2:03 p.m.?
That's what it looks like.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to see.
And that appears to be one of these children drinking a slushie or something along those lines?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the next image, does that say that it's July 14th at 5:20 p.m.?
I believe so.
And sometimes with these images, are you able to get location information?
That's correct.
And here this says Lake Ann, North Carolina, gives you coordinates.
Correct.
And earlier, did you and I look up those coordinates on a map?
We did.
And was that location where it says Lake Ann, North Carolina, is that almost exactly where the defendant lived in Woodfield Glen Apartments?
Correct.
Okay. And to be clear, this image is just,
It's just black.
okay. The next image, does that say July 17th at 10:30 p.m.?
I believe so.
And July 17th, if July 13th was a Wednesday, the Thursday would be the 14th, Friday would be the 15th, and the 17th would be that Sunday.
Correct.
And so that's July 17th, that Sunday at 10:30 p.m.
Correct.
Does that appear to be an image of the two little boys in front of a fire truck?
It does.
And does there appear to be several pictures, 3 or 4 pictures, all from July 20th at around 10:30 p.m. of these little boys in front of a fire truck?
There are.
And just to be clear, those are all July 17th of 2011 at 10:30 p.m.
Correct.
And then the next images, those also appear to be from July 17th at around 10:31 p.m.
Correct.
Again, it looks like there's little boys standing on a curb.
There are.
There's 4 or 5 of those that July 17th at 10:30 and 46 seconds to July 17th at 10:31 and 50 seconds.
Correct.
And then there's some other photographs from July 17th at 10:32, and it appears to be those little boys standing in a fountain.
Yep.
And then a couple minutes later, on July 17th at 10:38 p.m., again, more pictures of those boys standing in front of what appears to be a mirror, possibly.
That's correct.
And then July 17th at 10:43 p.m., again, more pictures of these little boys in front of the fire truck.
That's correct.
And does that appear to be Grant Hayes in that picture?
It does.
And the little baby Lily?
Correct.
Okay. And again, at 10:43 and 51 seconds is a picture of the two little boys, the baby and Grant Hayes.
It is.
And there's 2 more pictures around that time, all depicting roughly the same thing.
Correct.
And the next photograph, is that from July 18th at 7:49 a.m.?
I believe so.
Does that depict this defendant, Amanda Hayes, and Karen Berry and the baby?
I believe so.
So that's July 8th, if the 17th is a Sunday, July 18th at 7:49 a.m. That would be early on a Monday morning.
Correct.
And here on July 18th at 8:13 a.m., does that appear to be defendant Amanda Hayes drinking coffee?
It does.
Here, July 18th at 10 p.m., does that appear to be one of these children playing?
It does.
Then here, the next image or reporting on this phone, are these all appear to be in chronological order?
I believe so.
And the next reporting on this phone appears to be from July 20th at 12:15 a.m.
Correct.
And so if the Monday was the 18th, July 20th would be early on Wednesday morning.
Correct.
So just past Tuesday evening, and this would be 12:15 a.m. on Wednesday morning.
Correct.
Okay. And this has the suffix on this file as .mov. Does that mean it's a movie file?
Correct.
I show you that movie at this time.
Okay. Ready, Matt? Good job.
to talk to her, Grant?
And that appeared to be a short movie of Grant Hayes and those three little children in that sitting on a couch.
It did.
And in that movie, were you able to tell who was holding the camera?
I was not.
Could you hear a woman's voice in that video?
I did.
And the prior photograph before that movie is titled IMG_0390, and the movie that we just saw is 0405. Do you know if that means that 391 through 404, where those images went?
They could be deleted, and we weren't able to recover them.
And 0406, does that appear to be another movie?
It does.
And is there an easy way to turn the orientation of the video vertically that you know of?
You can't.
What's she talking about, Grant? She thinking something? Mm-hmm. You gotta hold her head up, son. Hold her head up. There you go. Mm-hmm. She's big, isn't she? She's picking you up. Say, be nice. Okay, doke. Okay, Grant. Just rub her belly.
That video that we just saw, does that appear to be from July 20th at 12:16 a.m.?
It is.
And the suffix says EDT, does that mean daylight standard?
Correct.
Okay.
It's Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. And are you aware if you have a camera that's set to Eastern Standard Time, if you take it to Texas and it's in Central Time, will that camera automatically change itself to, or will the iPod automatically change itself to record the accurate time?
If the iPod connected to a Wi-Fi in Texas, it may have updated it, but unlike an iPhone where it would automatically update, an iPod would not.
Okay. And to be clear, this is on the evening, or the early morning hours of that Wednesday, July 20th?
That's correct.
And I guess with the movie, is there also an image associated with it, which I guess is listed here at 12:16 a.m.?
That's correct.
And in that last movie, could you also hear a woman's voice in the background?
I could.
And then, is there another movie from July 20th at 12:16 a.m. and 46 seconds?
There is.
Put that for you now.
They like to fight over who gets to help change your diaper. What do you think, honey? Okay.
And again, that movie is from that early morning hours of that Wednesday,
That's correct.
which obviously would come after Tuesday evening.
Correct.
Other than several photographs, this one, image 0408 from July 20th at 12:21 a.m. Is that what that appears to say?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Does that appear to be Grant Hayes with the baby Lily?
It does.
The next image, 0409, is from July 20th at 12:21 and 59 seconds.
Correct.
And again, an image of one of the little boys, Lily and Grant Hayes.
Correct.
In this photograph, you can also see the waistband of what appears to be the underwear that Mr. Hayes is wearing.
That's correct.
Image 0410, does that appear to be from July 20th at 12:22 a.m.?
I believe so.
Again, just a similar image of Mr. Hayes, the baby, and one of the little boy's legs.
It is.
And does there appear to be a series of these photographs all around the same time between July 22nd, July 20th at 12:22 a.m. between 1 second going all the way to 28 seconds?
That's correct. There were quite a few.
Going to that last one, 0415, does that appear to be the baby crying with one of the little boys and Grant Hayes in the picture?
Correct.
And you have no way of telling who took this picture, correct?
No, I don't.
Then the last photograph, is that from July 20th at 12:23 a.m.? And does that appear to be Mr. Hayes with the baby?
It does.
And moving on in this report, does it also list all the music that was on this iPod?
It does.
Okay. And then all the contacts that were on this iPod as well?
Correct.
And then it puts them all in a timeline?
It does.
What we just went through.
That's correct.
And did you also do an examination of another iPod?
I did.
And was that iPod a number 13 and appeared to belong to this defendant, Amanda Hayes?
It did.
Or I might publish that part of State's Exhibit 495 this time.
You may.
And this was evidence item 13,
Correct.
and the email account associated with this iPod appeared to be appalmtree@aol.com.
Correct.
Do you recall Mrs. Hayes's email address and those email conversations with Laura Ackerson from the other day?
Correct. It was the same AP Palm Tree.
Okay, was it appalmtree at gmail.com?
That's correct. It was different server or service, but the same name.
And on this iPod, this has a note and appears to be some garbled word.
Correct.
Did you also find some internet history on this iPod?
There was.
Okay. And going to chronologically, I guess on the bottom of this, on July 16th at 9:54 a.m., it appeared that there was a Google search for U-Haul Raleigh.
Correct.
And then at 8:53 a.m. on that day, another Google search for Triangle Rent-A-Car and then Self-Storage Raleigh.
That's correct.
And that search for Self-Storage Raleigh, that occurred on July 16th at 5:36 p.m.
Correct.
And then on July 16th, I guess it's sort of chronologically out of order, at 9:03 a.m. there was a search for Raleigh Hitch.
Correct.
And then 9:56 and 10:06 a.m. on July 16th, there were searches for Pet Boys Raleigh and Pet Boys Garner, North Carolina.
Correct.
And on July 21st, at 3:57 a.m., did there appear to be a search for Pay As You Go AT&T?
That's correct.
And at 3:57 a.m. and 1 second, was there a Google search for the words MapQuest?
Correct.
And going back to July 16th, on July 16th at 9:55 a.m., on Google, do you see the root here, google.com?
Correct.
And were there some results or search results for U-Haul locations in or near Raleigh, North Carolina 27615?
Correct.
And earlier that morning at 8:53 a.m., more entries for Triangle Rent-A-Car and Raleigh Hitch.
Correct.
And then moving to the top of this, on July 21st, 2 artifacts left on this phone from pay-as-you-go prepaid cell phone plans and manage your AT&T accounts.
That is correct.
And those are from July 21st at 3:57 a.m.
They are.
And then there's one from July 11th as well for video calling with FaceTime on an iPod Touch.
That's what it appears.
And on July 21st, there was somebody went to this AT&T.com store locator to find an AT&T store locator.
Correct.
Okay. And the dictionary, again, that's the words that your autocorrect begins to recognize are spelled correctly when you spell them differently.
Correct.
Okay. And this is the Wi-Fi section. Is that, again, the first and last join certain Wi-Fi networks?
Correct.
And there's a last joined on July 16th at 1:46 p.m. for this Belkin.4AB3.
Correct.
And there's a first join for two other wireless networks, and those are on July 21st at 3:49 and 4 a.m. on July 21st.
Correct.
And then there's some photographs on here, and does appear that the most recent photograph on here is from July 13th at 2:25 p.m.
That's what it appears.
Appears to be a lot of baby pictures on here.
There are.
Okay. And some pictures of some artwork from July 10th.
That's correct.
And at the bottom of this, there's again music,
That's correct.
and then at the bottom there's that timeline again that it saves.
Correct.
Okay. Government approach witness.
You may.
This last package has been marked as State's Exhibit 528. I believe it's actually been entered into evidence. If you could take that out, is that a Sony camera that you're asked to download pictures off of?
It is.
And were you made aware that that Sony camera was taken off defendant Amanda Hayes?
Correct.
Okay. And what did you do with this camera to get the pictures off of it?
Detective Falk had brought me the camera, and I believe he had already taken the memory card out and asked me to download the pictures from that camera so that they could view them. So I put the right blocker on and transferred the photos over to a CD for him.
Your Honor, I'd ask to publish those parts of State's Exhibit 528 at this time.
You may.
Ms. Lass, before we get to the pictures, is it, when you copy the pictures off, do they come with the files, do they retain certain properties about them?
They do. They retain the date the picture was taken, and then it will have a new date of when I transferred them over to the CD.
Okay. Your Honor, just for clarity's sake, this first image has the little boys in it not wearing any clothes. And so I'd just ask if the media would be aware of that.
All right, Chad, don't cover that.
This first picture depicts what appears to be two little boys in a bathroom.
It does.
And in that bathroom, can you see a black shower curtain and a white shower liner,
There is.
and a black carpet and a black toilet cover?
Correct.
Okay. And by looking at the properties of this picture, can you tell that it was taken on September 15th of 2010?
It appears that way. It's hard to see.
Hard for you to see.
Yeah. Correct.
The next image, does that appear to show those little boys in that bathroom?
It does.
Okay. And in the top right-hand corner of that, can you see what appears to be an electric toothbrush?
Correct.
And this image, which is number 2768, do you see these little boys appear to be eating in the apartment?
I do.
And do you see a mat by the doorway in the right corner?
I do.
appear to say January of 2011, January 11th of 2011?
It does.
Okay. And does that mat appear to, it might be difficult to see in this photograph, but does that mat appear to have some tan-shaped squares on it?
It does.
And does this appear to be, this image titled 2856, does this appear to be an image of Amanda Hayes with Shay and one of the little boys?
It does.
And again, can you see that mat by the doorway?
I do.
This next image, titled 2864, does that appear to be defendant Amanda Hayes with a whole bunch of boxes of what appears to be iPhone covers?
It does.
And again, can you see that mat by the front doorway?
I do.
Does it appear that this picture was taken on February 3rd of 2011?
I believe so.
Again, this image titled 2872, does that appear to depict the electric toothbrush and the black shower curtain and the black toilet cover and the black mat in that bathroom?
It does.
Additionally, behind the toilet, can you see a toilet brush as well?
I do.
Okay. Does that appear to have a blue top to the handle?
It does.
Next image, does this appear to depict defendant Amanda Hayes in a yellow vacuum cleaner?
It does.
And this next image, number 2971, again, can you see that yellow vacuum cleaner?
I can.
Does that appear to be from March 10th of 2011?
It does.
This image, does this appear to be a picture of one of the little boys, and behind that you can see one of those mats similar to the one at the front door?
That's correct.
That appears to be a kitchen area.
It appears that way.
Again, just this image titled 3068, does that appear to be a closer image of that mat with the little boy in it?
It does.
In this image, titled 3112, does that appear to depict two of those mats in the kitchen?
It does.
This image, titled 3123, does this appear to be defendant Amanda Hayes and those two little boys?
It does.
Is this from April 5th of 2011?
It appears that way.
And these images, when you take them off the camera, are they all pretty much in chronological order?
They should be usually.
This next image, titled 3124, does that appear to be Miss Hayes putting something on her wrist and there being a box below?
That's correct.
This image 3125, a blurry situation with the same people in the picture.
Correct.
And this 3126, does that appear to be a watch on her hand?
It does.
Okay. This picture titled 3594, does that appear to be defendants Amanda Hayes and Mr. Grant Hayes in this photograph?
It does.
Is that from June 15th of 2011?
I believe so.
And Your Honor, the next 3 or 4 images depict some naked children, so again, I'd ask.
All right, again, don't take those from the media standpoint. Thank you. Go ahead.
This next image, does this appear to depict Grant Hayes and those two little boys in a bathtub?
It does.
Looking at the properties, does this photograph appear to be taken on July 21st at 7:14 p.m.?
It does.
And that appears to be a completely different bathroom than the prior ones we were looking at.
It does.
And July 21st, we were talking about July 20th was a Wednesday. July 21st obviously would be a Thursday.
That's correct.
And that was image 3753. This image 3754. Here does this appear to be another photograph of Mr. Hayes in the bathtub with these two little kids.
It does.
And does it appear to be somebody's finger over, I guess, part of the lens as the picture's being taken? Or is there something?
Yeah, it does a little bit.
Okay. This photograph's from July 21st at 7:17 p.m.
Correct.
This next picture, again, of the same situation, does that appear to be from July 21st at 7:18 p.m.?
Correct.
So that's 7:18 p.m. on Thursday, July 21st. And then this last photograph, another picture of these folks in the bathtub.
That's correct.
Your Honor, I think this is the last picture. That was the last picture I had with any sort of nudity in it.
Okay, go ahead.
Now this next picture, does this appear to be one of the little boys and Lily and what appears to be Amanda Hayes?
It does.
And this photograph is from July 21st at 8:03 p.m.
Correct.
Image titled 3758. Does that appear to be defendant Amanda Hayes with one of those little boys and Lily as well?
It does.
This is from July 21st at 8:03 p.m.
Correct.
This next photograph, titled 3759, does that appear to be, again, the same folks in the picture?
It does.
And Miss Hayes appears to be smiling in this picture.
She does.
This is July 21st at 8:04 p.m.
Correct.
So again, that Thursday, July 21st night.
That's correct.
This next photograph, number 3760, does that appear to be, again, Amanda Hayes with one of the little boys and Lily?
It does.
And again, from July 21st at 8:04 p.m.
Correct.
Just looking at this picture, do you see any blood or wounds on Amanda Hayes' legs?
It's hard to see from here. I don't see anything.
This next photograph, does this appear to be of some sort of hotel room or bedroom?
A bedroom, I'd say.
Okay. This is from July 21st at 8:15 p.m.
Correct.
To be clear, all these images, if they're one after the other, the previous one we saw was 3760, and this is 3761. It appears that they're in some sort of chronological order.
That's correct.
Actually, 3762, does that appear to be those two little boys?
It does.
Does this appear to look like a hotel room?
It does.
And does that appear to be Miss Hayes' hands on Gentle's arms?
It's hard to tell, but it looks like female hands.
Okay. And this photograph again is from July 21st at 8:16 p.m.
Correct.
And over here behind the boys, strike that. This photograph, number 3763, does that again appear to depict the same scene?
It does.
And does that appear to be inside a hotel room looking at the door?
It does look that way.
And this is from July 21st at 8:16 p.m.
Correct.
Does that appear to be a cooler behind those little boys?
It looks that way.
Here, item number 3764, again, does appear to be these little boys playing.
It does.
Hotel room. And this is July 21st at 8:16 p.m.
Correct.
Number 3765, does that appear to be the little boys again?
Correct.
This is from July 21st at 8:16 p.m. Is that what it appears?
That's correct, yeah.
Here in this photograph, 3766, does that appear to depict both Amanda and Grant Hayes with one of the little boys and Lily?
That's correct.
Does that appear to be from July 21st at 8:22 p.m.?
It does.
And in the prior pictures, looking back at the prior picture, Grant the fourth appears in the prior picture, and Grant the fourth doesn't appear in this picture, correct?
That's correct.
But everybody else is in this picture.
That's correct.
Okay. And moving on to image 3767, does that appear to be possibly a photograph taken by Grant the fourth of Amanda Hayes, Grant Hayes, Lily, and Gentle?
Possibly.
Okay. Is that from July 21st at 8:22 p.m.?
It is.
And this image, number 3768, does that again appear to be a family photo of Grant and Amanda Hayes and Gentle and Lily?
It does.
And both Grant Hayes and Amanda Hayes in this picture appear to be smiling.
They do.
That's from July 21st at 8:23 p.m.
Correct.
Here, number 3769, again, does that appear to be Grant and Amanda Hayes and those children smiling?
It does.
Again, from July 21st at 8:23 p.m.
Correct.
Here, number 3770, again, is this another photograph of what appears to be Amanda and Grant Hayes smiling with those two children?
It is.
Looking at the properties, again, that's from July 21st at 8:23 p.m.
Correct.
And moving forward to image number 3771, does that again appear to be, I guess, a closer look at Lily and Grant Hayes and the folks who are in the prior picture?
It does.
Again, that's from July 21st at 8:23 p.m.
Correct.
This next photograph, does it appear to be little Grant and Gentle jumping on a bed?
It does.
And again, from July 21st, and this is around a half an hour, 40 minutes later at 8:59 p.m.
Correct.
And again, the next image, 3779, that appears to be those little boys jumping on that bed.
That's correct.
And that's from July 21st at 9:03 p.m.
Correct.
And that's number 3779. This next photograph, number 3840, does that appear to be Gentle Hayes playing with some trucks on the floor?
It does.
And that's from July 22nd at 12:51 p.m.
Correct.
The next photograph, 3782, appears to be the boys playing on the floor with those trucks.
Correct.
And there appears to be a phone above them, and this appears to be some sort of office.
That's what it looks like.
This is 3782, again, another photograph of those little boys in that office.
That's correct.
And this is from July 22nd at 12:51 p.m.
Correct.
July 22nd would be that Friday, is that correct?
Correct.
And this appears to be Grant the Fourth in this picture from July 22nd at 12:53 p.m.
Correct.
And this image 3784, does that appear to be both of the boys in that picture in some sort of office?
It does.
That's July 22nd at 12:53 p.m.
Correct.
And so all these photographs that we just looked through, they all appear to be in chronological order, and there wasn't anything else found on that camera in between those times?
No, there wasn't.
Okay. This camera, I believe it's in front of you, but the time on the camera would be kept, and it would never connect to the internet to update the time. Is that-
No, it would be the time that was set on the camera whenever they bought it or if they updated it. So that's what these times are. That
With the iPods, though, when they connect to the Wi-Fi, it could update the time.
it could.
Okay. And so it could, if it said midnight Eastern time and the picture is taken in Texas, that could either be that it was taken at midnight Eastern time in Texas, which would mean that it was around 11.
From the camera?
Yes, from the iPods.
From the iPods, it depends.
Okay, so I guess one way it could be is that it didn't connect to the internet and it recorded the picture at 12:01 Eastern time, and that would mean that the picture is taken at 11 p.m. in Central time.
Yes, there's a possibility.
Okay, or it could convert it back to Eastern time after it reconnected to the internet and it changed the timestamp that way.
That's correct.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, questions?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
If I could ask Mr. Zellinger if he would be kind enough to put Grant, the iPod identified as Grant on the screen, beginning with the first page. Good morning. Is it detective or agent last?
It's just Miss Last.
That's good. Morning. When you download the information from an iPod, is this the first page that appears on your download?
We connect it to the laptop, the Apple laptop, and the Lantern software automatically detects it and will give us a screen basically to fill out our information, and then it goes on to downloading the iPod or iPhone.
And when you downloaded this first iPod, it indicated that it was an iPod belonging to the name Grant Hayes' iPod.
Yeah, that came directly from the device. The information underneath Lantern Forensic Report, where it has my name and the case number, that's the information that I input. The device information is coming directly from the device. So Grant or whoever filled out the information on the iPod when they first turned it on, that's the information that was input.
Down under email accounts, it indicates that the email account associated with this iPod is granthayes@hotmail.com.
That's correct. That would be the email account that the user would have synced the iPod with.
Okay. Could we go to the second page? Are you able to tell from the download of this iPod the location that it's at when the various different photographs are taken?
It just depends. The timeline shows the time frame of each thing happening on the iPod. So sometimes you can, with photos, if the setting is set to log the longitude and latitude point, then it can. I believe there were very few photos that did show the longitude and latitude point. Sometimes if they connect to a Wi-Fi, you're able to see where they are. There was one at Monkey Joe's, so you can, take information from that and reference where they are located, but not always, because iPods only connect to Wi-Fi. They don't connect to other 4G or 3G towers.
So the difference between an iPod and an iPhone is that an iPhone is always connecting to a Wi-Fi someplace.
It's connecting to a tower someplace, so whereas an iPod only connects to Wi-Fi locations.
So you don't necessarily find as much information from an iPod as you would from an iPhone.
That is correct.
Could we go to the next page? Somewhere on here, and I don't recall exactly which page it was, you'd indicated, for example, that it had connected to the Wi-Fi at Monkey Joe's.
That's correct.
Is that on this page someplace?
If you keep scrolling down, I think it's right above the pictures. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so I think I'm on the page that I want.
That's correct.
What we see at the top of the page is the word Wi-Fi.
Correct.
So what that is telling us is that at this iPhone or this iPod is connecting to these various different Wi-Fi systems at that particular time and that particular day.
That's correct.
So when we look at the first one, we see that the first connection was on July 21st, 2011, with the, it has Idle Air. Is that the name of a Wi-Fi system?
That's the name when you set up your router and you name it something. That's what's going to show up.
So at that moment, it's hitting off of somebody else's Wi-Fi system.
Yeah, it could be somebody else. It could be a business, a hotspot like Starbucks has, that sort of thing.
Someone who's named their Wi-Fi system Wi-Fi.
That's correct. They named it Idle Air.
But in this case, Idle Air.
Correct.
If it had hit off of your Wi-Fi system, for example, and you had named yours Courtney, it would show Courtney on there. Right?
Correct.
Now, on July 16th, the next one below that was at 4:21 p. July 16th, 2011, at 4:21 p.m. Am I correct?
I believe so.
Is there any way to know where that Wi-Fi Belkin 4AB3 was located?
There is not.
That's just one of those Wi-Fi systems that somebody has probably not named, but is just using the router,
That's correct.
whatever the router assigns to the location, right?
Correct.
And on July 12th, 2011, this iPod hits off of the Monkey Joe's Wi-Fi system.
That's correct.
Correct. The photograph that appears below under the term well, let me ask you this first. Do you see anywhere on there where this iPod hit off of the Wi-Fi system named Bellon? Wi-Fi system on May 1st, 2011, had it on.
That's what it appears.
Now, the photograph that you see below that does that appear to be Amanda Hayes?
It does.
If we could scroll down slowly, we were going through these very quickly before, if we slow it down a little bit so that we can talk about them. Are we now starting in chronological order going backwards?
I believe so.
Could we scroll down to the photograph that was taken on July the 18th with Amanda and her sister Karen in it,
It's right there.
right here? In that photograph, does everyone appear to be very happy?
It appears that way.
And that is a photograph that was taken on this iPod on Monday, July the 18th, 2011.
I believe so. You'd have to go back for me to confirm. That appears that way.
At 7:49 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or it could be Central Time. We're not really sure.
Correct.
Let's go to the photograph before that one. Not that one, the one drinking coffee. The one directly above it. One down, one down. Okay. That is also a photograph that was taken on this iPod on July the 18th, 2011, is it not?
Correct.
And does Amanda appear to be happy there?
I mean, you could say that. She's drinking coffee.
Okay. If we could now go over to the photographs taken from the camera. Could we go to what I believe you numbered 3760? This was one of the photographs you downloaded from the camera,
That's correct.
and I believe you indicated that this was taken on July 21st, 2011.
Sounds about right.
Does that appear to be Amanda, one of the little boys, and the baby Lily?
It does.
Do you notice the difference between this photograph and the photograph that you had seen on Monday of Amanda on Monday, July the 18th, 2011?
Can you repeat that question?
Do you notice the difference between the two photographs?
Yes.
She appears to be very haggard here, doesn't she?
I guess you could say that. Seems to be of
Have a
opinion.
moment, John.
Okay. Anything else?
Just briefly, Ms. Tremmel, I draw your attention to this photograph we looked at. Does Amanda look happy in that picture?
She's smiling, I'd say so.
Nothing further.
Okay.
She still appears to be haggard, doesn't she?
That,
Um,
that's of opinion, I don't know.
is that a question or a statement? Rephrased.
I was drawing.
All right. Thank you. Anything else? All right. You may stand down. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. How many additional witnesses do you anticipate?
One,
Okay. And who's your next witness?
Jerry Fault.
Do you anticipate that he will be a while?
I do so.
Okay. Are you telling me that the state will rest its case at the conclusion of his testimony?
I am.
All right. Folks, it's about 10 after 11. Why don't we take a morning break for about 15 minutes or so? Come on back after the break. Please, you haven't heard it all. Keep an open mind. Don't form or express any opinion about the guilt or innocence of the defendant or any matter of controversy, and follow my previous instructions. See y'all in about 15 minutes. Come on back at that time. Thank you.